Life Seen Through My Father's Eyes by Susan Mandville, an excerpt. My dad, Frank Santa Cruz, wore glasses most of his life. He attended school through 9th grade, around 6 years after his first pair. Although he was completely blind by the age of 86, he continued to wear glasses until the day he died. He said, "I feel naked without them." When his eyesight was still youthful, he lived, as most young people do, carefree. Dad had a bit of the devil in him. His parents ran an ice cream parlor called Rest a Bit on the ground level of their home. Directly across the street at that time was a Chinese laundry. From the front window of the parlor, Dad could see 3 workers sitting on low, round chairs. He and his brothers would sneak in and put tacks on the vacant chairs and rush back to watch the action. In 1919, when Dad was 3, the Elite Theater opened. It began as a silent movie house that evolved to show talkies. The movie theater was located on the same side of Main Street as they lived. When he was a bit older, Grandpa would give him a nickel to go to the show. Buster Keaton's silent films were his favorite. The theater was renamed in 1927 to the Sag Harbor Theater. Dad's keen eyesight during his teenage years made him adventuresome. One of his hobbies was roller skating. He was quite skilled. Story goes he was in the hospital for surgery to remove a pilonidal cyst at the end of his spine. After the surgery, his female friend came to visit and brought his skates. He glided up and down the hospital halls. The nurses told him to stop. "You will fall. You will wind up back in surgery." His reply, "Don't worry. I can see my way. I won't fall." Another pastime he enjoyed was dancing. He and his buddies would attend dances, and women studying at the Southampton Hospital School of Nursing would also attend. Perhaps this is where he first saw his future wife, Pauline Harker. In his early 20s, his eyes were set on opportunities. Dad was a go-getter. In 1935, he went to a job at a Chevrolet dealership in Southampton. He was low man on the totem pole. By 1939, he was the manager of 7 mechanics, 3 salesmen, and a bookkeeper. This was the start of his long career in the automobile business. In 1941, they closed the dealership because they weren't getting any cars anymore because of the war. He married Pauline, and they lived in an apartment on the top floor of the family home across the hall from his brother and sister-in-law. Soon, he was summoned to war. On December 11, 1942, Dad left his beloved village and family for the United States Army basic training. During the war, he served in Africa, Italy, and France. When he first landed in northern Africa, he was moved by the sight of young children covered with flies. He always saved his gum and candy to give children he met along the way throughout the war. With his frightened eyes, he witnessed many things he did not want to remember. While in a long line of men piercing the ground looking for landmines, he saw the remains of one of his 36th Infantry Division comrades that pushed too hard. At one point, his unit had to blow up a bridge. The soldiers drew straws, and the ones with the shortest straws would go on the mission. He was pals with 2 other guys since basic training. One drew the largest straw. One drew the mid-sized straw. Dad drew the shortest. In the years that followed, the one with the largest was killed in the war. The one with the mid-size became a prisoner of war. Dad arrived back in Sag Harbor on September 28, 1945, 4 months after Victory in Europe Day. He hadn't seen his wife and family in 34 months. Pauline and Dad were elated and looked forward to the birth of their first child. A changed man, he was haunted by the images of war for many years. He suffered shell shock. He joined the Chelburg and Battle American Legion Post 388. He became the commander and vowed to do his part to never forget and honor the people who lost their lives and suffered defending our freedom. Days after his 30th birthday in July 1946, Pauline and Dad welcomed a son, Peter. 3 days later, his saddened eyes saw his wife in a coffin. He struggled with grief piled atop of wartime horrors. 4 years later, in 1949, Jeanette, my father's only sister, married Ralph Tedesco. Dad's hopeful eyes saw Anne, Ralph's sister, for the first time. He learned Anne had served overseas during the war in the United States Army Nurse Corps. They celebrated the joyous occasion dancing. 11 months later, on May 21st, 1950, Anne and Frank married. In the early 1950s, they added to the baby boom, welcoming 3 more children. Their family became a family of 6. The 1950s through 1970s were a busy time in Dad's life. He was the manager of Lester Motors Chevrolet Oldsmobile car dealership in Sag Harbor. The place had mechanics, a bookkeeper, and 1 salesman, Dad. Reading the Wall Street Journal and daily newspapers, he kept up with the latest business news in the stock market. Additionally, at home, he managed our family finances and maintained the record keeping. Volunteering weekly to count money at bingo for the St. Andrew's Catholic School and engaging in fundraising for the American Legion were important to him. He parented his kids by coaching us in math, entertaining us with jokes, and watching slapstick comedies like Red Skeleton, Rowan and Martin Laugh-In. He found pleasure in his vegetable garden and rose bushes. All of his activities required excellent eyesight. During this time, his glasses were getting stronger and stronger. In 1993, after Dad had managed the dealership for 44 years, the owner, Dan Lester, closed the Sag Harbor site. Mr. Lester retired from Lester Motors in East Hampton and hired Dad to manage that dealership. In 1981, the year he turned 65, the dealership was sold to Buzz Chu. Dad worked with them through the transition and then thought it was time to retire. Buzz Chu had another idea. The deal was he would go part-time and collect Social Security. Buzzy would keep his pay aligned with the guidelines from Social Security, continue paying the family supplemental medical insurance, and supply other car maintenance benefits. The years between the age of 65 and 86 brought Dad many changes to his eyesight. Somewhere in the late 70s, he was diagnosed with macular degeneration. Gradually, he lost his ability to see straight ahead, yet maintained his peripheral vision. Once he called me so excited. He had dropped something and was on all fours feeling for it. The television was on and he was able to see the screen using his peripheral vision. During one of our visits, my husband convinced Dad to give up driving. He shared he was using the yellow lines on the sides of the road to drive to work. Once again, he told Buzzy he was going to give his notice. Buzzy began providing transportation to pick him up and bring him home. The employees of the dealership were Dad's second family. They all shared discussions not only about automobiles, but the stock market, family happenings, and current events. Dad worked for Buzz Chu until he was totally blind. The year he retired, Buzzy put a full-page tribute in the Sag Harbor Express with a picture of my father in glasses and the following words: Frank Santa Cruz was pretty much our first employee ever. In fact, he was already working behind the scenes before Buzz Chu Chevrolet officially opened over 20 years ago. When asked what Frank did at the dealership, Buzz said it's easier to think of the few things he didn't do. Frank finally decided recently at the age of 86 to retire. Buzzy hoped he'd stay until at least 100. Buzz said there's no replacing Frank as either a worker or a person. He is smart, funny, solid, caring, and versatile, and a million other adjectives you would throw out. All of us at your other family will miss you and just wanted to wish you the best and say thanks, Frank, for all you did for us. Excuse me. After his retirement, Dad's life changed dramatically. Little by little, he had to let go of the things that were part of him all the days of his life. He lost interest in comedy shows because he could no longer see face expressions that add to the humor. The mail no longer included the Wall Street Journal, as he could not read the written word. Luckily, my parents lived in the same house all their married life and never moved the furniture. This was a blessing. Dad could navigate without falling. Nurse Mom helped immensely to assist Dad to maintain his independence. She ordered check writing guides so he could continue to write the checks to pay bills by feel. His medicines were lined up on the bathroom counter with rubber bands at the top of the vials for those to take in the morning and around the bottom for the night meds. Mom folded his bills differently for each bill amount. He could manage the coins by feel. She would cut a bagel and put it on the counter in a bag near the butter. Every morning, Dad would toast and butter his breakfast. He would drop 2 sugar cubes in his hot tea. Right up to the time he died, he still shaved with a straight razor. At some point, they became aware of services available for the blind and print disabled at the National Library of Congress. Dad enrolled in the free talking book service. A device was delivered that would play books on tape. He received a quarterly catalog listing books that were available. Mom would read the titles and highlight his choices. They were delivered to the library that was directly across the street from home. Although Dad was not much of a reader of fiction when he was able to read, he particularly enjoyed the books of Lewis Lamar. He listened to memoirs and comedy. He enjoyed the service the remaining days of his life. My sister Kathy bought Dad a watch that talked. Pushing a button, he would hear, "The time is." After college in 2007, my daughter Katie went to stay with her grandparents to waitress for 5 months. She would quietly come home late after going out with her friends. Before she got to her bed, she would hear from the room across the hall, "The time is busted." For a few years before he passed, Dad didn't speak much. His voice was weak. When the family would all be talking around the dining room table, he would be listening to every word. He would raise his hand, and we would all stop and listen. Most of the time, it was to tell us a joke that had something to do with what we were all chatting about. He never lost his sense of humor. At the age of 93, his mind was still sharp. He lived to the best of his ability every day of his long life. He had a heart attack, was hospitalized, still able to speak for a week. The last meal he ate was a big bowl of ice cream. He passed away 2 days later on September 30th, 2009.